Okay, so let's move on to elasticity. Okay, and as I talked a little bit about, and I'll talk a lot more about, elasticity gives the reaction of one variable, the change in one variable, as a result of the change in another variable. Okay, so imagine I asked you, what if we had a quantity demanded that doesn't react much to price? What would that look like? Okay, so if I have a graph, right, and on this graph, we have quantity and price, and we had a demand curve, right? And the price increased from this point to this point. Let's call it P2 and P1. So if the price increased from P1 to P2, what's the change in quantity demanded? Well, it goes from here to here. Okay, so we'll call it Q1 and Q2. Okay, so P1 Q1 to Q1 P1 Q1 to P2 Q2. Okay, so the change in quantity will be Q1 to Q2. How do I get the change in quantity to be 0, right? We need Q1 to equal Q2, okay? And how do we do that? What would the shape of a demand curve look like where if I change the y variable, the x variable doesn't change, okay? Well, it would just be a straight line. Look at this. So if P1 goes up to P2, from P1 to P2, okay. Well, look, there's no change in quantity demanded here because it's a straight line. The intersection between P1 and quantity, or the demand curve, I should say, and the intersection between P2 and the demand curve are the same. Okay, so Q1 equals Q2. So this gives us a case where no matter what the change in price is, the quantity does not change, okay? So what I've actually just shown for you is two different kinds of elasticity, okay? One, an elasticity where there's no change, and we'll call it, I'll define it later, but we'll call this perfectly inelastic demand, okay? As price changes, quantity demanded does not change at all. In this one, we have some other kind of demand, some other kind of elasticity, okay? Where quantity does change as price changes, okay? So we can say that this curve is more elastic than this curve, okay? Because the quantity will change going from one price to another on this curve, okay? So this is a more elastic demand curve. Okay, this is less elastic. I should have used the typing tool in hindsight. Okay, so this is a less elastic demand curve. This is a more elastic demand curve. In fact, this is as little elastic, as low elasticity as you can possibly get. That's why it's called perfectly inelastic. Okay, but this is all to show you that elasticity, for this case, is going to measure the change in one variable, how quantity changes, as a result of the change of another variable, how price changes. Okay, so this is what we'll end up defining as price elasticity of demand, how the quantity demanded changes with price. Okay, and in this case, quantity demanded changes more than in this case, where it doesn't change at all. So we can say that this is a more elastic demand curve than this one. Okay, so I'm going to formally define everything now. Okay. So in order to make this so that the quantity demanded doesn't change with price, we're going to just change the slope. Okay, so the slope is going to kind of be like your the back of the mind, this is an easier way to determine how elastic a demand curve could be. Okay, where the flatter the slope is, the more elastic it is. The steeper the slope is, going all the way to a straight line up, the less elastic it is. Okay, and then sometimes, maybe not in this class, but in the book, you might see demand curves that look like this, where at different points there's different slopes. So this is a very flat slope. This is a very steep slope. Here, the elasticity is going to be much lower than here, because quantity demanded will change a lot more with price as you go from here to here than here to here, right? So anyway, that's all to say that the slope is kind of like a quick way to see what you think the quantity demand, the elasticity will be. Okay. Okay. So if you change the price from this point to this point, price will change, but quantity demand will not. This is what we call perfectly inelastic demand. Okay. Price goes up, quantity demanded stays the same, perfectly inelastic demand.